Okay, we're going to get started in this scene by setting up the lights. And before we do, I made just a couple changes in my scene here, kind of work some of the designs and colors over just a little bit, and also created another book cover. This was just a update of the one I had, and I put a couple different monsters on there and changed the color. And we're going to go ahead and drop in some lights. I'm going to come to my top view here so I can kind of explain what I'm doing. This is my perspective camera right here, and this is my render cam with a key frame on it. And it's going straight down the center here, which is where I want it. And the way we're going to light this, we're going to do what's called three-point lighting. And this basically sets up a triangle of lights. We have one off to the right and left of the camera, and then one in the back pointing towards the camera, so it lights from behind. And this is a standard sort of cinematic lighting approach that's used throughout cinema and photography as well. It actually has its origins in master painting. And what it does is we set up a key light over here. I'm going to choose the right side or the positive side of the screen for my key light, which is going to be the strongest source of light in the scene. And what I mean by strongest, not necessarily the intensity, but the dominant light source that's lighting the scene. The other side of the camera, we're going to place what's called a fill light. That fill light is going to be half or less than the intensity of the key light, and its purpose is to fill in the shadow side created by the key light. And then the light that we have in the back is called the rim light, and it's just going to be slightly off center. So this center line, we can consider that the 180-degree line. So we're just going to be slightly off to that on the shadow side of the objects, and this will create just a sliver of light on the edge of the objects, and the purpose is to just separate it from the background and give it more of a three-dimensional look. Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and drop my light in here. I'm going to create one light, and once we get that set up, we're going to duplicate it to the fill side and the rim side. So I'm going to come to Create, Lights, tear off my Light tab right here. So we have a number of different lights that we could be choosing from. Some of these are specialty lights that we don't really use, like ambient and volume lights are very specialized. The main four lights that are used in lighting are Directional Light, which is more of an exterior sunlight with parallel rays to it. A point light is more of a source of light, such as a lamp in the room that sends out rays in all directions, 360 degrees. And the spotlight is the one that we're going to be using. It has a lot of flexibility to it. It also renders very quickly, and this is used very heavily in feature films. The area light is a little bit more advanced light. It has a lot of the properties of the spotlight with some additional attributes to it. And it creates a very nice, soft, natural shadow to it. And we will be using this a little later on when we're lighting our character. But for now, we're going to stick with the spotlight. So I'm going to just click on that and close that down. And it dropped it right here in the center, as you can see. And this particular object, along with cameras, has a additional attribute to it that allows us to manipulate it differently. If you hit T on the keyboard, it brings up the show manipulator, and you can see it's got two manipulators on it now. So we're used to just seeing the one. This has got one for aiming and the one for moving the position of the light. Okay, and then I'm going to pull the light back next to my camera and bring it over to about 45 degrees. Okay, so maybe just a little less than that. So I'm going to bring mine in around 40. Okay. And it's still sitting on the grid, so it's not up off the ground yet. If we come to our side view here, we can see that it's just sitting flat on the ground. So I'm going to just pull it back a little bit more. Usually you want your lights behind the camera a little in real life, and here it doesn't matter. It's not going to create a lens flare. So I'm going to bring this up. It's aiming down now at our objects, and I'm going to bring it up. Okay, so we've got this kind of an angle here. That's close to 45 if we were to kind of draw a square around here. This is sort of cutting through the center of that, so we've got about a 45-degree angle here. And I'm going to come back to my perspective view, and we can take a look at that now. So that's what that looks like. And we're going to set up the properties for this, the attributes. I'm going to open up the attribute editor. Here's our light. So some of the common attributes for the spotlight, we've got the color. We're going to leave it at white. We've got all the nice work that we've done on our textures, as well as the color selections on here. If we choose a color over here, it's going to affect the look of the textures and shaders that we have. So we're leaving this at white. We're going to leave the intensity at 1. And we're going to come down here and make some adjustments to the cone and the penumbra. So in order to see the light in our scene, we need to hit 7 on the keyboard, and you should be able to see that now if I drag this across here. So it's not shining on the ground because all we have here is the grid. We don't actually have a ground plane. We're going to just create a temporary one for right now using a Polygon Plane. So I drop that right there in the center, and I'm going to scale it up. You can start to see it now. Okay. I'm going to come back and select my light. And I want to make sure I'm labeling everything here. So right now it just says Spotlight. I'm going to double click and call this Key for my key light. And I'm going to open up the cone angle to 90 is probably a little too much, so maybe we can do 65 degrees here. Okay, and you're noticing a very sharp edge right now. This is caused by the penumbra, so we don't have kind of a soft gradation out on the light. It's just ending very abruptly, which is not very realistic. We want to take this up to 10. We can put in a positive or a negative number here. You can do negative 10 as well. That will bring it in. I'm going to create a positive number, and it can go above 10 as well. It can be 20. This should be fine though. We're going to move down here to the shadows. Okay, so down here at the very bottom we've got Use Raytrace Shadows selected. This is the default. And a little bit about Raytrace Shadows. We're going to make some adjustments to the light radius and the shadow rays. If we were to render this right now, just zoom in here and render the scene very quickly, we're going to see some very harsh shadows, and this is not the look we're wanting. We're wanting something much more natural. And you're also seeing here for the first time we are getting some reflections of objects as well as the ground plane with the gray texture on it is actually this right here reflecting back up into the bottle and the glass. So we're going to have to address this as well. Let's get our shadows corrected first, and then we'll come back and work with the materials. I'm going to save this image. This is our kind of first stab at lighting right here. We're just going to save that. It saves it into the buffer so we can make some comparisons. And I'm going to take the light radius up to 10, which is pretty extreme. We're probably going to back off by half that. If I render this now, we should see the light breaking up. So we've increased the radius, so instead of just having a single point of light source, we've now got 10. So it's broken up the light, which is what we want. However, it's very grainy because we don't have enough light rays coming out. Usually I go 2 to 3 times over what the light radius is for the shadow rays. That would increase our render time significantly. I'm going to put this up to 20, and if it renders too long I'm going to pause and let it finish. Okay, it's not doing too bad here. So you can see it's still a little broken up. Overall, I would say the light radius is too high because it's just kind of losing the form of the shadow itself. So I'm going to take that down to half. So we'll have that at 5 and render that again. And we should see a little bit better form here now. Okay, even that is probably a little too soft. And my processor just kicked in. You can probably hear that. So I'm going to bring it down to 4, and I'm going to bring these down to 15 right now while we're working. I may bump them up later on, right before the render. We have some other adjustments that we can do for quality to increase it so we don't have some of the graininess that is appearing right now. I'm going to leave that right there, and let's go and take a look at the materials. So I'm going to start with the bottle, come down here to the Fong, and if we scroll down here, the first thing we want to do is take down the amount of reflectivity. It defaults at 0.5, which is too high. It's more of a mirror effect. So I'm going to take it down quite a bit. I don't want a lot of reflection happening. I want more of the focus just on the modeling and not the materials. And then the specular color and the cosine power. This is going to create the shininess of the overall surface quality. So right now it's got kind of a matte finish. If I bring it down like this, it makes it more diffused. If I bring it up higher, it creates more of a pinpoint light, which is going to create a more glass type surface. And I'm going to bring the brightness up as well. So we have now a very tight specular hit on there. I'm going to do the same thing on the glass. I'm going to bring this up as well, and then take this down to 0.02. Bring up our render window here and save this and do a comparison. Just render that. So we see the materials have changed quite a bit. We don't have that reflectivity anymore, and we've also tightened up the specular, so we see a much smaller specular that's more crisp. Okay? And our shadows are looking a little better here. I'm also noticing that my bottle is still a little bit low resolution, so I smoothed out the glass but not the bottle, so I'm going to do that as well. So I'm just going to select that. I'm going to make sure that the history is cleaned up on it first, and then I'm going to come under my modeling, mesh, and smooth. Okay? And I'm just going to leave it at 1. That should be fine. Okay, so I'm going to save my scene again as I go along here. It's a good idea as you start getting into rendering that before you start a render you save. If Maya's going to crash, it's going to crash right when you start rendering. Okay, I'm going to close that down, and I'm going to come back out to my top view. So I'm holding down the space bar, right mouse clicking, and that's giving me a marking menu. I'm going to come back to my top view so we can see our, zoom in here a little bit better, and make sure I've got my key light selected, and I'm Control D to duplicate it. It's Command D on a Mac. The X coordinate, I'm just going to drag it over to the other side of the camera. So 45 degrees on the negative side. And we're going to address the intensity on this first. So I've got an intensity of 1. So I'm going to bring it down to 0.3 is probably good. Everything else can remain the same. And if I come down to the shadows and the light radius, I think this will probably work. We may have to come back and address some of our shadows here. There's even a possibility that we may take the light intensity down a little more and turn the shadows off, depending on if our shadows are looking disturbing. We don't want to see a duplicate of shadows going off to the other side here. So we can either do that by adjusting the angle of the light in this view. We can bring it down like this, so it's kind of hiding our shadows and filling in the light. Or we can actually bring it up even a little bit higher like this, so it's kind of filling in a little more from above. So I've brought mine up maybe 1/3 again as much. Okay, so let's do a render from that. I'm going to go back to my render cam here and make sure that I'm rendering from what my camera is going to see, and I'm going to go ahead and render that. So we're seeing the shadows now filled in by our fill light. Those look much better, and I think with the light up above like that, it is creating a little bit of darkness back in here, and another shadow going across this shadow. That's what that darkness is right there, as well as a little bit of a shadow here. And we can also try just turning off the shadows on our fill lights. So let's do that first. I'm going to just drag this down here and go ahead and uncheck the use Raytrace Shadows. I'm going to save this and just render again. So it gets a little washed out when we don't have shadows in there. You can kind of see that now. We'll try bringing the intensity down to 0.2. Save this and do another render here. Okay. Our label has also got some specularity on that. That's why it's getting washed out. This looks better. We can kind of see back in here now. We don't have that other shadow crossing over here. Let's go ahead and select our label and fix the specularity on that. So this is a blend. I'm going to just drag this down to here, and we're going to take the specular color way down, reflectivity off, and we can pretty much just drag all of these down very low here. So it's going to have just a very subtle sheen to it. Okay. And if we come up here, we can just drag a marquee around that label and render that region with this right here. This way we're not rendering the whole thing over again. So that looks better. You can see it's taken that off. All right, so we can try turning one of our objects here. Let's select the bottle and make this transparent. I'm going to come down to the Phong and come up here. So currently we've got a ramp shader attached to the color channel. We're going to attach that to the transparency through the hypershade. So I'm going to click on this icon right here, and I'm going to find my ramp shader for that. I think it's this one. Yeah, that's for the bottle. So I'm going to right mouse click and say Graph Network. Okay, so that brings up the nodes that belong to this particular shader. And we can zoom in here the same way we maneuver out in the viewport. So what we have here is our bottle shaped texture, and then we have the ramp itself. This is our color ramp, and the color out is currently going into the color in. So that's this area right here. So that's the ramp coming in here, and we want to attach it to the transparency as well. I'm going to middle mouse drag and take it down to transparency. So now you see it is attached here. It gives us a preview, and you can take the diffuse down a little bit here, about to 350. Let's give this a try. I'm going to go ahead and close that, and let's render that, see what that looks like. Okay, we've got black behind here, so should be able to see a little bit of transparency going on here. So if you want to go ahead and do that to your glass, you can do that as well, the goblet. I'm going to leave mine like this. And I've come back out into my outliner here. I cleaned some of this up. I had some kind of extended labels going on here. So I've got my fill light. I want to make sure that I'm labeling my lights appropriately, my key light. And I'm going to come out to the top view again. We can select the key light and duplicate it with Control D or Command if you're in a Mac. And I'm going to swing this around using T, show manipulator. It's going to swing it around to the back side, and I'm just going to go off center here a little bit. Okay, so the position's going to be right about here. I'm going to come back out to my perspective view. So we want this light, the rim light, to be pointing into the camera. So I'm going to bring it down to about the same level as the camera here. And then I'm going to raise this, aiming it at the camera. Okay, so it's no longer pointed at the ground. Right, this light's going to have the same intensity as the key light. If we have it pointing at the ground, it's going to create shadows out here in front, and we don't want that. So this is the effect we're trying to get. We're trying to get this slight sliver going around some of the forms here. It's mostly going to affect the glass. It's not going to affect the books too much because of their material surface. It's not going to pick up the specularity, but it is with the bottle and the glass. Let's go ahead and render that. And we should see it in here. We can just start to see it right there on the edge of the bottle. Okay, so I'm seeing the penumbra and the cone angle of that light, so we're going to want to fix that. And I'm going to bring the intensity down. It's just doing a little too much reflection inside here with the transparency. Okay, so let's make those adjustments. And first of all, we need to, instead of key 1, it's going to be rim. Change that over. So the key shape now is rim shape. And I'm going to bring this down to 0.7. And for the cone angle, this one I am going to bring up to 90. So it should widen out a little bit. And the penumbra, I'm going to soften this and bring it up to 20. So we'll double that amount. Actually, we could probably go up to 30. I can still see it in the scene here. We might have to back this up. So let's go back to our top view and pull this light back. Like this. Okay. So now we can see it's a lot softer here. I think with all of these we could probably open them up just a little bit. We're going to see this as within our scene a little bit. So let's bring these up to 80 as well as the fill light cone angle at 80. Okay, and we'll come back to our perspective, our render cam rather, and that looks better. Okay, we'll just do one more quick render here, and I think we are probably ready to come in and make the final adjustments and set off a render. So let's just check this one more time. My processor is working overtime. So we're going to come back in the last lesson and set up the environment. We're going to eliminate this ground plane here that was temporary, and we're going to set up the final render settings and kick off a render.